Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the next project that we're going to be working on. This one has to do with pastel. So this is a set that I get of the type of pastels that you're going to have in class. These have these little squares. We've been working on these for the last week or so, so you should already be pretty familiar. Now we also have the charcoal, which I have a little tiny piece right here ready to be able to be used. But I wanted to go ahead and talk about the light for a little bit. Now, when you're working on any project, you want to consider where the light is hitting on your project. Now in this particular case, the light is coming from directly above the object, and you're going to see these little two highlights right up on the highest points of the object. So if I change the direction of the light on the object, it's going to change the direction of the shadow that you get. Now if you notice, if I put the light behind the object, it's putting the shadow way behind right here. Now if I were to pick this up like this, it's going to create this outline of your object. Making sure that the outline and the shadow match your object's contours is very important. So in this particular case, I'm going to go ahead and set this up just a little bit so you guys can get a good view while I try to show you guys the context. So in this particular case, if I put the little dinosaur to the side, you're going to see that it creates this outline. This outline is what is called the contour of the object. The contours are these outside edges. Knowing how these contours work and where the curves are is very important for creating your work. Now in this particular case, this outside edge will create also what's called a silhouette, just a contour which you fill in with a dark space. Now I wanted to point out in these shadows, you have two different sections. You have this part of the drop shadow and this part of the dark shadow. If you notice, there are two spots that are slightly different in tonal value. Now if we remember correctly, the word tone talks about a color plus gray. So you have this paper, then gray, and then a darker area right here. Now the darkest area is actually located inside of the dinosaur at this time. So you can't really see it very well. But right inside here you have a complete shadow that just sort of swallows up the end of the pencil. So you want to make sure what you're doing is, so if it's a vessel, you want to make sure you're including these dark sections on the inside that still follow the contour and include the edges of the object. So for example, if I move these pencils out of the way, or not pencils, this paper clips, you can see these brighter areas just on the inside of the lip of the shape. So if I adjust the shadow, the light just a little bit, and I change the direction, again, you want to follow the contours for the drop shadow itself, but you also have higher areas of highlights and low lights. So highlights on the highest edges, lower lights and tints and tones follow the contours on the outside edge of the objects. So I'm going to go ahead and move him out of the way. We're going to start with a simple one for this particular project. Now for this project, you're going to be limited because I'm going to ask you to not use any actual black on your project. Now, that might seem tricky when you're trying to do shadows, but many shadows are actually made up more of brown. So if I pick up this paper, with this paper, I'm going to go ahead and leave the shadow up here just for a little, so you can see a little bit better. If I pick up a brown and I place this within the shadow, it's going to match the shadow a lot better than the actual black would. The black is way too dark. So if I go ahead and I go in with a purple instead, the purple will match still better than the black. So this is a matter of including the different shadows and choosing what color that you're going to use very, very carefully. Now again, I'm personally would rather use a brown just for this paper if I was going to be actually trying to draw the shadow on this paper. Now, I highly recommend using cool colors like blues, purples, or greens for creating any of your shadows, because cool colors are put back in the image when you look at them. Now, cool colors aren't necessarily going to be the color that you use. You might, like I said, use a brown, which is actually technically a warm color, as it is a shade of black, of orange. Now, in this particular case, I'm going to go ahead and start with a nice clean paper, straighten it up a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and just use the charcoal just so you can see the general idea of what I'm going to do. Now, in this case, I want to just do a very simple image, and I want to start with an egg. Now, an egg in general is just an oval. You want to be able to practice your shading techniques using something simple. Now, eggs come in all sorts of different colors. Robin's eggs are even blue. So it doesn't matter what color you use for the egg itself. So I'm going to go ahead and start by putting in some highlights using whites on the upper edge of the object. So I'm going to go ahead and do this right here. You see where it's lightening the charcoal right on the top edge. And that's exactly what you want it to do. You want to go in a circular motion. And then you're going to want to start curving the lines. Because remember, you want to start follow the contours. So you're going to want to start by curving the lines inwards around the shape. Now, as you can see, it's going to make a lot of powder. That's just par for the course when you're using chalk pastels. It's going to be powdery. It's just what happens. Now, you're going to want to follow the contour. This crescent moon shape is very important for getting that edge and getting that color and tonal value that you want. I'm going to go in with the orange now. And use these warm colors for the actual image, just so you can really see how it works on your drawing. Now I'm going to go in with red, just for these last areas. And as you can see, I'm just filling it in, following the curves of the object. This is already starting to look more round, but I really want it to look like an actual three-dimensional object. So one of the important things is to go in, and again, just like with the previous project, you want to take your fingers and blend it out, following the curve of your object. These smooth curves are what makes it look more three-dimensional. Now, again, you want to make sure you're following the curve, starting light and moving into the dark areas. You don't want to start with the dark and move light, unless you're doing a very slight blend. You want to start light and move to a darker area. Every time you go back to the light area, you want to go in with another finger. That way, it's not going to make a muddied image. Now, if you go from here this way, it's just going to create a really gross kind of brown tone. Now, I'm going to go ahead and pick up one of these bluer tones, and I'm going to draw an oval underneath my object. And again, I'm not going to be using any black other than that one charcoal outline. So I'm going to go ahead and go in with these blues just to go inside towards the bottom edge. And it's just an oval shape, but it's more squished. This is very important for creating that idea of an object sitting on your paper. Now, in this case, I'm just going to go and follow the edge, making sure not to push to the inside of my egg just yet. So I'm just going to follow that edge of that oval, blending it in nice and smooth. Now this is already creating that look, so I'm going to go ahead and take this same pastel that I have right here, and I'm just going to follow this curve. And as you can see, it's creating the gray tone in and of itself. As you can see, I just picked it up from right here, this blue. And I'm just going to follow this outside edge with this blue. And by combining that red and that blue together, it's creating the purple shadow. And incorporating this, going back down now, as I've mentioned before, this purple, this powder, is actually very important because that is what's going to make this muddied color that you need for your shadows. Now, for the deeper shadows, you want to go in and trace that outside edge with the purple. Just this bottom edge, drawing a smaller oval on the inside, and then go ahead and put a line down at the base of your drawing. And you're going to go ahead and go in and blend it out. Now, these edges, and once you get to this point, you want to go ahead and go in with just the purple and trace that bottom edge. Now, if you want it to be a little bit darker, you can even go back in with the red. And that's going to go and blend these colors together to really, really darken it up. Now, because I used reds and oranges and purples, a really good color to blend it out is actually a green. Once I put that green in, it's going to start looking more of a black once I blend it together. because green and red don't really go together that well when you're actually drawing. So as you can see, it starts to create the illusion of a three-dimensional form without ever actually using the color black. Now, down here it's a combination of greens and purples, and while you may not necessarily see it on your screen, you will be able to see the difference in the actual artwork. Now, I want you to practice doing these particular forms and keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate it while you're first practicing. Now, if you want to go ahead and fix an edge up here or lighten it even further using white, you can, but you want to make sure not to overcomplicate it for this project in and of itself. You can turn this into a lollipop or a football or a basketball, and you don't have to necessarily start with warm colors. It could be cool colors if you wanted to, but you want to make sure that you're choosing your colors very, very carefully. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask.